the latest American tanks have just arrived in Ukraine. So we're talking about the Abrams tanks. Now, originally, the M1A2 Abrams were slated to arrive in Ukraine. So those are the latest version. Well, they're already quite old, right? Around 20, 30 years old, the M1A2 Abrams, right? So they gave Ukraine the M1A1, but depending on the version, you can actually get an M1A1 Abrams to be quite good and on par with the M1A2 V3. So let's take a look at this article from Newsweek. They said Ukraine's new Abrams tanks could be quickly destroyed by Russia. Aha. So I wanted to read some excerpts to you from this article. And, I mean, in the media, they're making it sound like this is going to change everything for Ukraine. Right. So it's interesting to see a piece like this, which is saying actually the complete opposite. And if you remember, they hyped up the Bradleys and the Leopards and the Challenger. The Challengers are, the Challenger 2 is British, the Bradley is also American, and then the Leopard 1 and 2 are German tanks. And so guys, you remember that clip? There's a clip where the tanks are just on the battlefield. They're just laying there, smoking, and this drone picked up all the footage. Take a look. So that's what happened. That's what happened to the tanks. They did not fare too well. They did not fare too well, unfortunately. Here's another one. I mean, these are just like rows and columns of Bradleys and Leopards just sitting there. Because, it doesn't matter what kind of tank you have. It really doesn't matter what kind of tank you have and how modern you think it is. You cannot just charge past a minefield, and not just minefield. Remember, you have these rows and rows and rows of defenses that the Russians have put up, where you've got dragon's teeth, which are basically these pyramids of just giant slabs of concrete that are pyramid shaped that they've placed in rows, like teeth, right? But they call them dragon's teeth because of how massive they are. Huge obstacles that are meant to just physically impede a tank from, negotiating these obstacles or maneuvering past them. And then on top of that, even if you get past it, you've got these ditches that are dug so wide. They have bulldozers do the work. They're dug so wide that even if you somehow got there, you would fall right in and you just can't get back up. Because remember, if you have a small gap, a tank can drive over the gap. But if the gap is larger than the actual tank, you can't get it back up. And if it's deep enough as well, more importantly, right? And so you have the dragon's teeth, the tank ditches or tank traps, and then you have the actual mines, right? So you have anti-personnel mines, which are for people, and then you have mines that are put into the ground. Sometimes they're controlled by radio. Most of them are activated by weight. So just by driving over it, the wheels, right, which have the track wrapped around them, the track would just break, right, like a chain. It would just break. And Jesus, I mean, who wants to get out of that and repair it, if you can even repair it? And keep in mind, on top of that, you've got artillery in the trees. The Russians have rows and rows of howitzers. They have missiles. They can just throw whatever they want at you. So you're a sitting duck. This is the definition of a sitting duck. And I just showed you the videos and the results of what that looks like. So having M1A1 Abrams or M1A2 Abrams is not going to make a difference, right? It's just not going to make a difference. Now I will read to you from the article some of the things that they had mentioned, right? So they said that the U.S. government has pledged 31 M1 Abrams tanks to help in its fight against Russian forces. And Abrams tanks are already in Ukraine and coming to reinforce our brigades, Zelensky wrote on Telegram. And he said, I am grateful to our allies for fulfilling the agreements. We are looking for new contracts and expanding the geography of supply. Someone from the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense said that, quote, they should be used in a very tailored way for very specific, well-crafted operations, because if they are used at the front line and just in a combined arms fight, they will not live very long on the battlefield. They need to be used in those breakthrough operations, but very well prepared. I don't know what that means. It's pretty vague, but there are many versions of the M1A1 Abrams. You have the the SA and the FEP versions, and basically we don't know exactly which version they've given the Ukrainians, but if you upgrade them, they've got upgraded sights on some of the M1A1s. you can get it on par with an M1A2. But once again, I go back to my original point, which is that it doesn't matter how well the sights for the commander are in the tank. You cannot physically get past defenses like this, and the Russians have been dug in for almost a year now, right? This is just a simple fact of life that the Russians have very, very, very well prepared defenses. And yes, if you used a nuclear bomb, you could probably get past it and we would all die. And yeah, but it's just not realistic, because the amount of firepower you would need to actually get through those defenses, if the Americans, let's say, wanted to do the work for the Ukrainians and use, their whole arsenal, of course they can break through these defenses. The technology exists, but there comes a point where you risk escalating too much, right? And then of course we enter a nuclear war, and this is it's not even worth talking about, because it's ridiculous. There's nothing good or tangible that will come out of that as a result. I mean, the whole world will be over within 30 minutes, truly within 30 minutes, and then you have a nuclear winter and no food. Actually, most people would perish from lack of food. So I don't think this is going to make a big difference. I think the big difference here is just for the people making the tanks, right? Because when you want to give, for example, you want to give Ukraine military aid, it's not really, it's not aid. You have to look at it as profits for the arms industry. Now, one of the reasons they say that they gave the M1A1 is because if they had given the M1A2, they would have to be built from scratch. And if you look at the 3,500 tanks that the that the Americans have, they actually took from those to give to Ukraine with the USAI program, right? So here, you can look at this. This is an excellent piece, right? So the decision to transfer the M1A1 is understandable and was immediately chosen by Defense Express to be faster than the M1A2. The USA transfers tanks under the Program of Ukraine Security Assistance Initiative, which is the USAI. And so they were ordered from the manufacturer and not under the Presidential Drawdown Program, when the weapons go directly from the reserves of the armed forces. Okay? So irrespectively of whether you take them from the drawdown program or whether you order them directly from the manufacturer, at the end of the day, the company that builds the tanks, or whatever weapon we're talking about, whether it's Raytheon or General Dynamics or Northrop, they're going to be refilling stocks. Okay, so if the Americans, they use the drawdown program, let's say time is not an issue, and they use the drawdown program and give it to the Ukrainians, they're going to want to refill those stocks. So they're going to order from the manufacturer. And when you go directly to the manufacturer, same thing. So the weapons industry, they make money at the end of the day, regardless. And is this going to change is this going to actually have an effect on the war? No, I don't think so. And it's ridiculous, because they're laughing like hyenas about the prospect of Kim Jong-un going to Russia and handing over artillery shells in exchange for space technology or ballistic missile technology, whatever it is that he gets. They're laughing at the prospect of Putin getting artillery shells, when artillery shells actually make the biggest difference in the war, right? In terms of who's winning the war. It's artillery shells and drones. And like I said before, Russia have more artillery shells. They can produce more artillery shells. They are firing more artillery shells than Ukraine. And Russia have better drones than Ukraine. And both of these things come from Russia's production, but also from Iran and from North Korea. These things are winning the war. The decisive factors, artillery and drones. And then they laugh at this. They laugh at this on PBS NewsHour because they think they're geniuses. Then when it comes to the M1A1 or M1A2 Abrams or the Leopards or the Bradleys or the Challengers, who just end up as columns of smoking armored vehicles on the battlefield, then, they have nothing to say. But that's the result. That's what happens with Western tanks on the battlefield. So I wouldn't really get my hopes up if I were the Ukrainians. And no, I know Zelensky's now going to go ask for F-16s, like he's been doing for quite a while. As soon as he was promised tanks, then he started, like literally the same day, he started nagging for F-16s. You have to remember that if the Russians see any F-16 being used by the Ukrainians, they will consider this to be a nuclear threat, because for them, they're not going to wait and find out whether this F-16 is carrying a nuclear weapon or maybe it's that F-16. These jets are more than capable of carrying a nuclear payload. Of course, right? This is not a problem. You can have an F-16 deliver a nuclear bomb. So the Russians are not going to wait and find out whether one of these F-16s happens to be carrying a nuclear bomb or not. They are just going to treat it as a nuclear threat and act accordingly, meaning they might use nuclear weapons, meaning they might escalate to a level that causes us to use nuclear weapons. I don't know. No one wants to know and no one wants to find out, right? That's the whole point, except Zelensky, I suppose, and the people he represents, meaning the weapons industry. I really don't understand how this is not clear in Western press. They just don't mention the issue of nuclear escalation, nuclear confrontation. They act like it's a non-issue, like this is like any other kind of war. It's not. It's really not. It's more than a proxy war. This is a hybrid war, and the ramifications, they're very, very big, and the risk of nuclear escalation is very, very big, and it's very, very present every single day, every single minute that this continues.